So it's great pleasure to introduce Sukhesh and Isha. And do you want to introduce yourselves? Say a little bit about yourselves?
Yes, sure. I just first of all, I just want to thank everybody, the team, the conference team that has put together this conference. I don't know who they are. I know only David and the people at Goldsmiths College, whoever, everybody. Thank you very much for putting this together. And then, of course, David, thank you very much for this invite. Yeah, I haven't known David very long. We only got to know each other a few months ago, and that was because of Shubha and the online course that he ran with David, and I signed up for it, and that's when I met David. So yeah, I'm obviously like we're very. I was very surprised when you asked me to come and present here, and of course, very excited as well. So both of us are Isha and I, and and of course, I haven't known David that long, but sort of my relationship with Dorothy goes a little further back. I'll explain that in a bit. Um, but first, just to say that Isha, who is presenting with me, and I, both of us, we feel absolutely privileged. This is such an honor to be sharing this space with such amazing, brilliant people, and people whose work has, in so many different ways, subtle and not so subtle, shaped my thinking about my work for sure. And of course, our thinking around the project, which we are going to talk about today. And I think our hope is that, perhaps we can add something a little bit to this conversation about how to shift practice towards agency and empowerment. And I think the question of how to make this shift happen in our own praxis is, to my mind, more important now than ever. Um, I'm here in Bombay. Isha is in the UK, and I'm running off a mobile hotspot. So in case anything happens, please bear with us. But I just also wanted to say that I'm here in Bombay with a group of artists and educators. And these are exactly some of the questions we've been talking about. These are the things that we've been talking about over the last couple of days. We're working on a program which is for in-service teachers in schools, and these have been our conversations about agency, about transformation, about power. So just very briefly, let me just say like what's also going to happen. Um, and what we're going to do is introduce ourselves, of course, and I'll just give you a background of the project that we've been working on and around which this presentation is based. I'll tell you a little bit about the project and sort of the methodology that we used. I'll give you a couple of illustrations from the project, things that we found to be curious, to be interesting, and a few of the emergent sort of findings. Um, we'll take about 40 minutes or so of, we'll do about 40 minutes or so of talking, or maybe a little bit less, maybe, yeah, maybe about 35 minutes or so, because I also want to leave a little bit of time for questions and comments. I think both of us are really interested to hear people's responses to this work. And of course, about the intersection of our work with the principles of Dorothy's work. And we're not going to distract you with any slides. You're just going to see our faces all this time. And we're just going to concentrate on telling you the story of our little project. So I'm going to first of all give it to Isha to introduce herself.
Thank you so much. And yeah, we are very happy to be here, and I'm absolutely thrilled to get this opportunity. I know this is online, but I just recently moved to the UK just last week, and I'm enjoying the weather, as you can see behind me. But yeah, I was very excited that we could do this online, and I get to meet a lot of you. I do not have a background in theater, but I have a background in education, which I'll be talking about. And we have, like, I have known Sukhesh sir for over for 14 years now. So I was just thinking about it this morning that I joined the program in 2010 and it's 2024. So it's been 14 years of knowing each other. And it's really nice to kind of, come together to do this. So my name is Isha, and I recently finished my PhD in education from the University of Hong Kong. So I was in Hong Kong for almost 4 to 5 years. And my PhD thesis was about teacher education, so pre-service teacher education. And I was looking at this idea of social justice disposition. So what it actually means for me in my thesis was that tendencies and intentions of individuals to act in certain ways it's like thinking about social justice, thinking about diversity in the context of India. And my fieldwork was this very same program that we'll be talking about today, Bachelor of Elementary Education. So I'll be talking about the project little bit later. But before this, I did my MPhil in education, and then also my master's was in education. I'm quite interested in projects which are related to gender, pedagogy, and performance, and how we can bring gender and social justice issues within that. And that's how I got associated with this project, which I think Sukesh sir has been doing for almost 2 years now. And I was a participant in this project, and that's how I came to be associated. And it was very interesting that he asked me as a participant to kind of bring my own lens to this discourse about what teacher education means and how can we link performance and pedagogy. And we will also be talking a little bit about agency as an individual. So yeah, that's about me. And I look forward to how our dialogue goes and hear some of your perspectives on our work. Thank you.
Please, if you can, please ignore the sir that she adds after my name. It's really difficult to tell Indian students to just address you by your name. It's been 10 years. I've known Isha, so I call her by her first name, but she insists on saying Sukhesh sir.
Yeah, it's quite hard.
If you can, Isha, just say Sukhesh. That's totally fine.
Okay.
Um, okay, so I'll just give you a little bit of a background about myself. So I trained as an actor teacher in a theater in education company in Delhi, in India. And my training essentially involved making and performing participatory theater for young people. It also involved some teaching, which was mostly in a workshop style format because we used to travel to schools, we used to perform, and then there was some amount of teaching that we had to do. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of that. And the company where I trained, it was modeled very closely on the lines of a British theatre and education company. And why that is quite an interesting story. And I want to tell you this because I think we're in a very unique position in India where uh, theater in education is quite strong. The term has come to take on its own meaning. It really does not refer to TIE as it evolved in the UK, But it has taken on its own meaning. But yet, it is this whole idea of theater as pedagogy is very well established, and particularly in a place like Delhi. And the reason this happened was because there was this one individual named Barry John, and he came on a volunteer program to India to teach. And he had trained in Leeds. And when he came to India, first he was in Bangalore, and then he moved to Delhi. And then in Delhi, the National School of Drama invited him to set up a company for children and young people. So what he did was set up the NSD, the National School of Drama, TIE company. He left that and he started his own TIE company, and then training programs for people to learn being actor teachers, which is what I joined, and I became one of those people. I trained in the program. But the thing was that he introduced us to all the legends of theater and education, including Dorothy. And I have memories of sort of raiding his library, and we used to take the books and we used to photocopy pages, and we used to go and we used to read up, and then on what was written, how people there were some books that we had access to, or he had access to, and then we'd try and sort of bring that into the work that we were doing. So it was all sort of very removed and very much trying to imitate things. But yeah, my connection to Dorothy goes that far back. And I've always been fascinated with Mantle of the Expert. I think it's really quite an amazing methodology. But rolling roll, I found out about much data. Anyway, so after my training in Delhi, I spent a year at Royal Holloway College in London as a student on the physical theatre program. I don't think the program exists anymore, but it was a brilliant program, and it was meant to provoke sort of more embodied approaches to devising and making theater. And so this was sort of the beginning of my connection with the two worlds of performance and pedagogy. And I have since worked between both these spaces, but primarily coming from a practice-based perspective. Um, the other thing that's interesting at this time, and also in terms of how TIE took hold in India, at around this same time that I was training, this was the mid 90s, Delhi University started a teacher education program, which I think was quite unique in many ways. And this is where Isha was. Isha was on this teacher education program. That's where I first met her. That's where I first taught her. That's where I became Sukhesh Sir. Uh, and I'm going to let Isha tell you a little bit about this program, because our project sort of connects with this.
Yeah, so yeah, as Sukesh said, yeah, I'm trying. So this is a 4-year long professional program, which essentially the idea was that we do not have a teacher education program that actually challenges the given knowledge that we have had from our colonial legacy, and teacher education was being done in similar ways, and we still have around like 15,000 different teacher education programs in our country, and everybody's doing their own thing, but this was essentially designed in a way which was really well thought out. And there were many challenges that the program makers faced at the time. And how do we know this is because if you look at the program handbook, which is quite ancient now. It was written in the 1995, but it tells you the story of how this program came into being. And in their own words, they say that we were trying to buck the common trend. So, unlike the conventional teacher education programs, this program was designed to bring in pre-service teachers to question the forms of knowledge that were existing around us, to question the schooling system as a structure, and how can they become these agents of transformation. So this is the kind of vocabulary that the program was using. And this was for the very first time that there was a lot of focus on moving beyond the psychological theories, like, not just teach the future teachers about the behaviorist theories, but also make a shift to, talk to them about the social, cultural, economic aspects of India as a diverse country. And to do that, they had, of course, so many like different courses spread across the 4 years. And I think one thing which was very unique for a program in India, and I think it still is because our higher education in India is still very much, English medium. So we have English medium instruction in our programs. But this was the program which was the first time it was offered as a bilingual program. And by bilingual, of course, I mean English and Hindi. And now, why Hindi? Because this program was located in the context of Delhi, where Hindi is considered to be a relatively more spoken language. So, Hindi and English were mediums of instruction when the teacher educators would teach and facilitate the classrooms. And I think another unique point of the program was it had courses like gender and curriculum studies, where there was a lot of critical engagement that was encouraged on the part of this student teacher or a pre-service teacher who's going to become a future teacher. That you engage with the content, you engage with the curriculum, and of course, I mean, I could go on and on about how it actually, it actually made me, question everything around me. It made me question patriarchy to start with. It made me question, why is it that my mother, she has a business to run, but then when she comes back, she is also supposed to take care of the kitchen. So she's doing something like which we call the double shift, and my father is not accountable for all the household work. So we had a lot of fights while I was in this program, and a lot of things changed, perspectives changed. But I remember, and I would like to talk about one instance where I would say that theater was really instrumental in, bringing that change in me and bringing that voice. And I would say this not just for myself, because I also engaged with a lot of participants from the program for my PhD research. And they all kind of articulated this same thing, that theater kind of made them help, like, bring a voice, which they felt that they didn't have before. And it didn't bring it in the sense that, oh, we have a teacher educator who's pushing us to, kind of speak up. But it was more like there was an environment which was very participatory and very dialogic. And it kind of made us feel and think about things that we had not done before. And one of the things I would focus here is on self-reflection. So we were, kind of asked to bring in perspectives from our own life prior to this program, and then think about them and then apply them, and with the theory that we were being taught. And then, interestingly, I remember, I'm not sure if Sukhesh remembers this, but there was this play that we did. It was called Eid Gaha, which is by Prem Chand. And he invited us, me and one of my friends, to do this kind of a storytelling play with this community children in Shadipur in Delhi. And we kind of did this play. We had our costumes on, and we were, trying to tell a story. But then we would pause at these different moments, and then we would ask children if they have any questions, if they want to share something. So that is like, that memory is still with me. I still remember the space we were performing. And I really think that those experiences of bringing performance and pedagogy really helped me as a teacher later on, because I felt that I was free of those hesitations of, how would people see me. So yeah, I think that therefore theater was quite instrumental for us to kind of, I would say, have this sense of agency that, okay, we can do this, and we have things in control, and this is my classroom, and I know what I'm doing. And Nobody gets to tell me otherwise. Yeah, thank you.
So, I mean, as you know, theater was one of the courses in the one of the courses which was taught in the entire program. Now, the interesting thing was that this BLEd program was interdisciplinary. And what they did with theater was essentially they allowed different colleges in Delhi University to actually invite practicing artists to teach that theater course, and which is where I came in, and which is how I became involved in this program. um, and what that did was, like, inviting these people from outside was bringing in a completely different perspective. And then there was this constant dialogue between the core faculty in the program, and then the teaching artists like me who were there, and then the students, which kind of shaped the development of this whole program. Um, and what I think is that there was a spectrum that was created for basically different identities to flourish. And then a space emerged for these ideas to flow back and forth and then feed off each other. Um, and then a very interesting thing happened. They started doing an evaluation of the program, and when the first evaluations of the program were done, basically students were picking repeatedly theater as one of the most significant and transformatory courses in the program. And I think there's a separate kind of research project which sort of looks at this. Um, and then they did further evaluations. Pattern was the same. Theater kept cropping up as very significant, and students were marking it as transformatory. Um, and For us, and I think also reading all these evaluations, I personally don't think that theater was the only differentiating force behind the transformations that could be seen. I think it was the whole interdisciplinary nature of the program, and theater was just functioning as one part of it, but it seemed to fit in really well. And it seemed to be kind of sort of driving the engine, so to speak. And I think exploring the self was one of the major focus of the theater courses. And then the reasoning behind was that a teacher should have an understanding of her own strengths and weaknesses and limitations, and trust herself and be able to engage with with her weaknesses and limitations, and to have her own vision of education before she becomes an educator. Um, and this became quite a sort of core philosophy. Um, However, when we started on our project and we started to explore this connection between theater, the performing arts, and agency, it was extremely difficult to unpack how and why theater was having such a significant impact. And perhaps you may have a better idea of this than I do. I mean, we could see things, but we somehow couldn't figure out, where they were coming from or what was happening. Um, um, have have any of you seen the film Kung Fu Panda? Yeah, you have. Okay, so I mean, it's a wonderful film, great animation, beautifully done, wonderful actors, and for those of you who haven't, I think just a very brief thing. It follows the adventures of this giant panda called Po, who is chosen as the dragon warrior, and then who must, in a very short time, he must learn the secrets of kung fu, fulfill his destiny, and save the world, or the other way around, save the world and fulfill his destiny. And Shifu, who is his teacher, is played by Dustin Hoffman, is his designated teacher, but he basically rejects Po outright, saying, this fat panda cannot be the solution to our problems, which is basically the end of the world, which might be coming given the results of the election. But anyway, that's a separate subject. But on the surface, the film is just, a classic story about the underdog or under panda in this case. But if you look at it, for me, it's also a metaphor for teaching and pedagogy. And it raises many questions about who gets taught, who decides who gets taught, who is teachable, what should a learner look like, be like, what should teaching and learning look like. um, and and I think these are some of the questions that then became a part of our project as well. Um, and the project is called we called it Counter Imaginaries, and which basically was an attempt to sort of make present the narratives of marginalized voices in what is the teaching learning architecture of education. And for us, marginalized had a different sense, a different meaning. That the marginalized voices happen to be those of the teachers and of the children, and particularly children from outcast communities. But for the purpose and scope of this project, we decided to focus on the voices of the teachers, to look at how teachers viewed the idea of agency and what is the relationship between agency and the creation of a socially just and equal space in the classroom. Um, and what we wanted to map out was how and in what sort of ways did teachers exercise agency. The project was funded by the TESF network, which stands for Transforming Education for Sustainable Futures. And they supported projects in 4 countries: Rwanda, Somalia, Somaliland, South Africa, and India. So theirs was a more of a systemic approach to the question of transformation of education. But through our project, we looked at the question of teacher education. Within that, the agentive practices of teachers and what those might tell us. And therefore, this sense of creating a cartography of agency, and what that might tell us about transforming teacher education practices. And for the project, we asked 18 teachers who were working in different types of schools and who had all graduated from the BLEd program to become participants in our study. And so that is how I asked Isha as well, and Isha became involved in the study. And then later on, of course, in a much more sort of expanded role. Um, in addition to that, we also asked 6 teaching artists who were also engaged in teacher education to participate in our research. And this is a relatively small group, I think. And what we did was that we engaged in in-depth conversations with each of these people. And each of these conversations ranges from about 2 to 4 hours. And we recorded the audio only in these conversations. And in the end, what we ended up with was an extremely rich, very layered archive of narratives, which was also very overwhelming. It's taken us a long time to sift through these narratives. But it's also been very, very rewarding because of the kind of different inflections that it offers us. It's taken us a process of basically listening, re-listening, and listening again to understand some of the ways, not all, but some of the ways in which agency gets exercised, and how it shows up and how it is articulated. Um, I just want to mention also that there was this wonderful article by a paper by Mark Priestley, Gert Biesta, and Sarah Robinson, which they wrote in 2015, which sort of wonderfully unpacks this concept of agency. And of course, I mean, there is the whole context. According to them, there's this emphasis on seeing teachers as the most important sort of in-school influence in bringing about the change in education. And therefore, it becomes important to look at teacher agency as an alternative means to understand how to teach, how do teachers enact practice, and how they engage with policy. But they also say that, agency remains a very, very inexact and a very poorly conceptualized construct, which we also found, where it is often not clear whether the term refers to an individual capacity of teachers to act agentically, or to sort of an emergent phenomena, which is dependent upon the quality of the individual's engagement with their environments. And of course, often it remains linked to very narrow agendas of school improvement, which might also include teacher autonomy. However, for them, autonomy does not equate to agency. And they say that, teachers who are granted autonomy may just simply fail to achieve agency. And what they suggest is that rather than seeing agency as kind of, a property or a capacity of the individual, that we should take a more ecological view of agency and see it as an emergent phenomena, which is dependent upon the conditions through which it is enacted. And what this implies is that people are always acting in their environments and in their context rather, simply. And so the achievement of agency always is a result of the interplay of individual efforts, the resources and contextual and other factors, as they come together in unique situations. So it's not something that people can have, that their view is that it's not something that people can have, but it's something that people do, or, more precisely, it's something that they achieve. And the achievement of agency should be understood as, something which is a configuration of influences from the past towards the future and engagement with the present. So in that sense, it's a dynamic kind of process. And I will share with you now just a couple of extracts from the interviews with three with our participants, and that which for us highlighted a particular kind of tension in conceptualizing agency as well as equal and just spaces, and how this became one reference point for us in moving towards developing this sort of cartography of agency. So one of our participants, who is a teacher education and a practitioner of the theater of the oppressed, when she was asked about diversity and inclusion, she said, diversity and inclusion are hard to practice when you have this kind of a structure, a socially structured kind of exclusion. And she's referring to the Indian context here. Education should also be a model for our communities. What can communities be like? How can we be self-supporting? How can we help people grow and reach wherever they wish to reach? And one of the teacher participants, when she was asked the same question, she replied, I actually feel that society is constructed of the people. We are the building blocks, us, children, and individuals. There are other structures, but humans are a bigger structure which can develop or transform much more quickly. Culture doesn't change so fast, but generation after generation, the way of thinking, the education level of people, the standard of living, these things probably change 2 or 3 times in the course of a lifetime. So when I say that we need to work on the individual, I mean that this will be the source to change things quicker. And what seems to become apparent from both of these comments is the web of connections that both the participants are drawing between the self, agency, and transformation. Both the participants, in their articulation, sort of bring us back to the idea of the ultimate goal of education, which is in that case, and also like I think transformation, the transformation of society. However, the means to achieve this transformation are different. In one case, individual, and in another case, collective. And for one participant, agency is invested in the individual, and for the other, it is invested in the collective. One of our other teacher participants had this to say. She said, I am a firm believer of the fact that schools are not the necessary places to receive education. If a boy or girl living on the streets is selling vegetables or doing any kind of work, is able to do some kind of addition or subtraction, would we say that the boy is educated or not educated? Education is a never-ending process of learning and unlearning. And I think here there's another indication of the collective as a force for change and transformation, which offers us another set of perspectives on the working of agency. And what collective social action does is that it changes how community or society thinks about certain things. Collective social action, it obviously has the potential to change laws and policies, but also more importantly, to change consciousness. And there were two recent collective social action movements in India, which became quite significant events of political action. And one of them was named after the site where this protest took place. And the second one was simply known as the Indian Farmers' Protest. And both these protests, they offered up very new vocabularies to frame ideas around public education. And I'm just quoting a little bit from this piece by Yash and Singh, and they wrote this piece about these two protests. The library at Shaheen Bagh, and this is the name of the protest site, subtly linked education to resistance by carving out a physical sphere of knowledge within the protest site. The appropriation of space to build a utopian world of uninhibited exchange of ideas, free expression, and revolutionary philosophy within the library space was an important endeavor that communicated an alternative and idealistic vision. As a result, the library was a small effort to address this relative deprivation by emerging as a community space for learning and making education accessible. And so in this sense, the library at Shaheen Bagh sort of endorsed Ambedkar's dictum, Baba Saheb Ambedkar, who wrote the Indian Constitution, of educate, agitate, organize. And it highlighted the importance of developing critical faculties beyond the pluralistic and inclusive ideas of education, rights, and identity, which the library at that site sought to propagate. And it also symbolized resistance and solidarity. And so the library served as a tool for reclaiming lost spaces and recreating centers of learning that had been seized from the students. And so just to wrap up at the end, I hope there wasn't too many words. Just to wrap up at the end, I think this really, as coming from a practice-based perspective, I think the idea of agency for me, I always thought of it as being very self-evident. But I realized that it isn't so. And I had to really question my own assumptions of, what agency is and what is meant by agency and what do we mean by agency when we go in and actually practice theater within that space of education. So just to sum up, I think these are some of our sort of findings, just a few of them. Agency is much harder to articulate, but a little bit easier to observe. Um, Performative practices like theater are agentive practices and can impact the development of agency noticeably. And this development of agency has the capacity to shift the balance of power in the teacher-learner relationship, but it is dependent upon a number of factors beyond the individual. Um, and agency, which is generally perceived as agency is generally perceived as an individual capacity, but it would be more useful to imagine agency as a process and as a system of practices, which should be understood as a configuration of different influences from the past and orientation towards the future and engagement with the present. Thank you very much. I think that's all. Just one other thing that I just want to add. So we are also going to be sharing the findings from our research project, and they are in the form of a podcast, which is why we recorded the audios. Isha and I are working on a paper that we are going to write. We're also working on a comic book based on the narratives that we have received, and eventually towards the development of a performance. The comic also becomes hopefully a learning resource, and then eventually a performance as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, both of you. I mean, fascinating stuff there. Chris Lawrence is with us, and I'm very pleased that with part of the conferences that we're having, the annual conferences, we're linking up with journals and publishing articles. And Chris has got a plan that Drama Research Journal there'll be a special issue, won't there, Chris, arising out of this conference. So, I mean, it'd be great, and Isha, if you put something into that journal, I think, or that would be great, because you're covering so many issues that I think are really important about agency. I mean, it interests me, in fact, that I'm teaching this course with Shuba. I've done 3 or 4 now, and there seems to be an openness in India, and some teachers anyway, to changing the way of teaching. You're shaking your head, because I know that there's also this mindset in India. I mean, one of the people on the course said to me once, they spoke to a teacher in a school and talked about agency and shifting the power, and their response was, why would we do that? Why would we give away our power? Why? So, but it does interest me that there is an interest there, and at least in some sectors, in Dorothy's work, in Mantle, and in working in a different way. But you've raised so many issues and questions. So we're talking about the agency of young people, but it's also you're talking about the agency of teachers themselves, and the teacher's self, what drives them or how they see the model of learning. So there's maybe a need for a paradigm shift there in the way they see young people or the way they think about learning. But also your points about the collective and the individual agency. And it really makes me think of how Dorothy's emphasis was on teaching as a collective process, working together. And this is revolutionary, because so much of teaching, certainly in the UK and I'm sure elsewhere, makes children isolated. Says, you don't talk to each other, sit on your own, do your work. It isolates, it individualizes. And it's also, because you were talking about the collective and the social, and one of Dorothy's concerns was giving young people a voice in society and a stake in society, because we cut them off so much from society and keep them separate from it. So all that you're saying about agency, absolutely. I think Dorothy would be listening and saying, yeah, yes.
Wow. I just want to say, David, you should be thanking us for laying the ground for you. It's like, really, I mean, I think it's actually really, really fascinating. Somebody needs to look at this more, like the influence of theater in education in India. And I think Shubha as well will testify to that. It's really, really fascinating. But what you said about an openness to changing and agency, it's very tricky. It's very, very tricky. Our education system is structured in a very different kind of way. So I think to achieve kind of um, different to achieve a wider effect or like at the level of policy is just extremely difficult. But at the same time, you have this entire system which is private and where they are doing things which are just absolutely amazing. I'm right now, I told you that I'm engaged with a group of people and they are running a 3 year long in-service teacher development program, and it's really like slow and paced out, and but the questions that are going on in my head are like, what is making these people invest in this? There is financial resources, there is time, there is money that is going into this, but it's the idea of change and transformation is very, very tricky. Yeah.
Well, I know that Isha says it was partly because of the context, or partly maybe the encounter with theatre that was transformational for her or for the people on that course. So, I mean, theatre itself, what was coming through, can be an agent of transformation in the way people operate.
Yeah.
I
It'd be
don't
great
know.
to hear from also other people if they have any responses or.
Yeah, I don't know if Yona's there because Yona's been in and out, I think, but it's certainly both what connects you and her work that she was talking about earlier is this question of teacher narrative, of teachers' stories about their own journeys, and
Hmm.
and also the importance of the context that you're working with, because in Wales the curriculum is very different, and that creates a very different opportunity, but
Hmm.
also challenge, I think, for teachers
Yeah,
to operate because they are not given agency. This is the thing. Teachers in our system, anyway, teachers are not given agency because they're told this is what you teach, and they're constrained so much by the
that's
system
right.
that they're in, and they're not encouraged to be agents, not in
Yeah,
the as much as they used to be, anyway.
yeah.
So,
And which is the point that you raised about the collective, for example, and the connections with Dorothy's work. And I've been saying this to you, like, whenever we've had conversations, which is why I find rolling role so fascinating. And in that sense, it sort of approaches this idea of the collective education. In India, we happen to have these kind of movements, these protest movements, which were triggered by political events, and they became absolutely fascinating sites, which I think made us really question, what is the nature of public education? What is it, and what is fundamentally the nature of education?
well, I'm sure you and I could carry on, but then, yes, is anyone else want to come in with comments or
Yeah.
questions? So I can see that Amanda has put, interesting that there was a shift in higher education in the mid-90s to bilingual teaching. This suggests a change at that level, which takes time to percolate through society and manifest itself in schools. Was that isolated, what we're talking about there, the development that was taking place, or is it percolating down? Amanda, I know you've unmuted yourself. Do you want to say anything on that?
No, it's just something that stood out to me as the talk progressed. Thank you very much. And that this idea that actually change comes from different angles and different places at different times. And that to me seemed a big shift in HE. I think that was that perhaps one particular college. Perhaps I could be corrected there. But when you get that kind of thing happening at university level, um, it it does take time to percolate through down. And here we are talking about the things that we're talking about today. But I was just wondering how key that particular change was. Because if universities don't do something like that, you've got to ask yourself, where might we be now? And I just wondered if you got any reflections on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Isha, you can also jump in, but essentially the program was offered in 8 different colleges and it ran for a really long time. Right now, the program is in danger because the government has a new education policy which is going to change the qualifications for teachers. This is a 4-year program, and so it's a significant investment. But there were shifts that were observable. It's when people graduating from this program, one of the most practical things was none of them was lacking a job. Of course, that's the whole education sector. If you're a teacher today, like you can get a job pretty much anywhere within your this thing. But what was interesting was that the schools were actually seeking out graduates from this particular program. And so they were seeing something in their classrooms that there was obviously a shift. I don't know, Isha, if you want to jump into that and clarify that a little bit more. I mean, I just know that much, that schools were actively seeking out these graduates and saying, like, we want graduates from this program. So you could see this kind of effect. There were concentrations of these people, and you could see changes in the curriculums, how people were teaching. But again, like as a wider thing, I mean, it needs to be supported by other factors outside and not just simply, a few colleges.
Oh. Yeah, I think what Sukhesh just pointed out, of course, that was the kind of change that we have seen over the years, because this was around 1990s, so now it's been 2024. But then I have to say this, that when we were talking about this bilingual education at higher education, so this program was just in 8 colleges in a particular university in Delhi. And I also have to talk about this, that this was only women-only colleges. So this program is still in 2024 offered at women-only colleges. So the sorry. So that is the context that we are talking about. And then in terms of, I think, change, I'm not sure if there are other programs in general at undergraduate level or at the university level who are offering bilingual education. I don't think so. It's still very much English as a medium of instruction. However, at schools we have bilingual instruction. It depends on the state where you are placed. So when a teacher graduates from this program and goes to teach, especially in public schools, I'm talking about, not the private schools, then you have to, of course, have your medium of instruction based on the place where you are in. So if you are based in Delhi and you're teaching in a public school in Delhi, then you are also expected to be teaching in Hindi and English to your students.
Yeah.
But as as Sukesh said that, there was a lot of curiosity around this program, and then people were wanting to seek out, BLEd graduates. I would say there is again some contention there, because when I was in my final year of this program and I was doing an internship in this public school, I could sense a lot of tension from the school authorities, because this was a public school and they were very set in the ways they were, and as David pointed out, that they didn't want us to have any agency.
Yeah.
And we were misfits, I would say, that we were not fitting their agenda. They wanted us to decorate the walls of the school and spend time in beautifying the school, and we were wanting to be in the classrooms and doing storytelling with kids, which almost created like a lot of noise and chaos. So we were the ones who were creating chaos as teachers, and therefore, at the time, this is 2014, the school principals didn't like us. They rather preferred students who were graduating from other programs and who were, doing the things that they were prescribed to do. So I don't know if this has changed over the time, but still, I would say there are more private schools where we see our BLEd graduates going on and teaching, because there is a lot of interest in fee-paying private schools where they want their students to have this kind of alternate education, and the mainstream public school education still would find us as rebels without a cause. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. We've got to wrap up, but any final questions or comments? No? Well, thank you both. Thank you very much for a really stimulating discussion. And I do hope you submit something to the journal. I see Chris has put the a link, an email address in the chat.
I've got the email address, Chris.
Yes, I've corrected the email address. You
Yes.
noticed the misplacement of some letters there. And this is an appeal to anybody at the conference who is preparing a presentation or paper. Why not submit it for peer review to that email address?
And it's also for people who are not at the conference, isn't it, Chris?
Absolutely, yes.
Join the conversation.
Yeah.
And I think we can see already, what an important conversation this is. And the whole question that you've raised, Sukhesh and Isha, about what is agency? Okay, how do we define agency? And that distinction you made, the collective and the individual, is a really key element or key point in that. So thank you both. Thank you both really very much for your contribution.
Thank you, David. Thank you for this invitation. It's been an absolute pleasure, really. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for being here and listening to us.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.